Here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ricky Levine. Ricky has been the executive director of the Holland Historical Trust, which includes the Holland Museum, the Kaplan House, and the Settlers House. She has over 15 years of experience in the nonprofit arts sector. Her leadership at the museum has allowed the organization to move forward in many ways, including the incorporation of the Smithsonian Institution's Spark Lab and enhanced development and marketing programs. She has also led the effort to make the museum more relevant, accessible, and inclusive in the West Michigan community. She holds a BA from George Washington University. So welcome, Ricky, and thank you for joining us. You'll be making an introduction as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim. It's great to be here. It's great to see some friends that we haven't seen at the museum for a while or just starting to come back. So nice to see new faces as well as some old friends. I had the privilege when I was asked to do this presentation to sign up and say what I was going to be talking about. But subsequent to that, we hired a new education and community programs manager, Michelle Stempian, who has far more knowledge about art than I do. And she, even in the interview process, was super excited that we were bringing an Alton exhibit in. And I thought, Michelle should really talk about the bulk of this subject because she's so much more knowledgeable than I am. I will tag team with her a little bit on some upcoming events later on, but allow me to introduce Michelle Stempian, who's been with the museum just over 3 months now, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself.
Thanks, Ricky, and thank you to everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. And I do recognize some faces and names. I'm starting to meet many of the volunteers at the museum. So I see some of you on the call and it's lovely to see you. So yes, my name is Michelle Stempian. I have been with the Holland Museum about 3 months now and really enjoying my time with the museum and working with the great team there and really becoming a part of it. And excited about all the possibilities of things we're going to be able to do. I am also thrilled today to be able to talk to you about the Alton exhibition that is currently on view at the Holland Museum. And just a little bit about myself. I've been in museum education for over 20 years. I began my museum career at the University of Michigan Museum of Art and then spent actually over 20 years at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, where I finished as Director of Museum Education before coming to the Holland Museum. My background is primarily in art and art history. I have a bachelor's degree in art history from Carleton College and a master's degree in art history and museum studies from Case Western Reserve University, where I did actually specialize in American art, particularly 19th century American landscape. So an exhibition on Matthias Alton is completely up my alley. He is an artist that I have spent some time with previously in exhibitions that I've done at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts and is a favorite. So I am really excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about the exhibition today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So here's the man himself, a self-portrait by Alton. And so the exhibition that we have is Matthias Alton Beyond the Oil Paintings. It is currently on view and will be on view until July 25th. If you haven't had a chance to come down and see the exhibition, I do encourage you to do that. But why were we doing this show? 2021 is the 150th anniversary of Matthias Alton's birth. The Holland Museum is delighted to join other Michigan museums in celebrating the life and achievements of the Dean of Michigan Painters. This exhibition, curated by the Holland Museum's Wendy Geringer, in collaboration with Grand Valley State University Art Gallery and curator Joel Zwart, is markedly different from its companion exhibitions. Although Alton is best known for his colorful painterly representations of working farmers and the Michigan landscape, Matthias J. Alton, Beyond the Oil Paintings, offers the viewer an intimate glimpse into the artist's mind and his creative process through the selection of drawings and watercolor sketches. So I will spend a little time looking at some of those works of art, but before we do that, I wanted to give a little more background, a little more foundation on Alton himself and some of his other works. So Altons Story is an immigrant story. Born in Gusenberg, Rhine Province, Germany in 1871, Matthias Alton immigrated with his family to the United States in 1889 at the age of 17. Matthias, along with his parents, Michael and Maria, and his brother John and sister Catherine, they settled in Grand Rapids, Michigan, joining an already established German immigrant community. The family embraced their new home. Matthias began taking art lessons and worked as a decorator in a local furniture factory. By 1895, Matthias Alton had married Bertha Schwind, and together they oversaw Schwind and Alton, a paint and wallpaper store at 32 West Bridge Street. As Alton began to grow his artistic studio and his career, he also began to grow his own family. Matthias and Bertha welcomed their first child, Eleanor, in December 1896, and they would add a second daughter, Camelia, in 1898, and a third daughter, Viola, in 1903 would complete their family. The picture on the right is the Alton home and studio in Grand Rapids. The family moved to this house in 1914, and it would be their home and Alton studio for the rest of his life. And it is still there, and you can still, it's not open right now, but someday, hopefully, it will be open again for tours. Art was the vehicle that forged Alton's ties to his adopted home. While he built his artistic reputation on portraiture, and also his, really that's what paid the bills, was commissioned portraits. So you see the example of the portrait of his wife's sister Julia on the screen, and other commissioned portraits of prominent Grand Rapids citizens. He also experimented with other subject matter like still life and the paintings of the Michigan landscape. Alton was an accomplished artist from the start, creating paintings with balanced compositions, lively brushwork, and jewel-like colors, but he was also a smart businessman. He understood his audience and their tastes, and he was collected widely, even at a very young age. Although he traveled extensively to study art and paint in other locations, and at one point did contemplate moving his studio and his family to New York City, he realized Grand Rapids was the best place for the work that he wanted to do, which was focused on small town and the countryside of the American Midwest. But that was a countryside that was changing. And later in his career, when he was criticized for keeping a more traditional, realistic art style and continuing to paint idyllic, romanticized scenes of farmers, animals, and the lake, while other artists were painting the modern industrial landscape or moving towards non-representational or abstracted styles, he continued on. He forged ahead. Despite the rapidly changing art world, Alton's work continued to appeal to his predominantly West Michigan audience. Alton was eventually best known for his landscapes, and his themes and subject matter remained consistent throughout his career, exploring changes in the seasons, light effects, the leisure of daily life, and the dignity and heroics of labor, in particular in man and animals working together. In the 1915 painting, Husking Corn at Dusk, that we see here on the screen on the left, his figures are strong and well-formed, and he was celebrated for his realistic portrayals of horses. So in this comparison, we see two works, one from relatively early in his career and one from near the end of his career. But you can see his ability to capture the essence of a subject, even from the very beginning of his career, and that stayed consistent. Alton understood and appreciated the new modernist styles, but he remained conservative in both style and subject. Modernist styles did affect his palette and brushwork somewhat, as we see here when we compare these two works. So we notice that the work on the left has a much darker palette, different tonalities as he's looking at the scene, of course, at dusk with the sun going down, but it's a little more conservative in its palette as well as how he's applying the paint. We see in the work on the right, The Road to Lake Michigan Through Autumn, which was painted in 1936, that it is much looser in the application of the paint, and his palette is much more high key and intense. But clearly he has stayed loyal to his favorite subjects. Alton might be considered a regionalist artist, in that an artist who focused on particular geographical centers. And while that was usually West Michigan, Alton did travel to a variety of locations throughout his career, including extended stays in the Netherlands, Spain, and the American Southwest. And he would do what he did best, paint the people, the traditions, and the land. Sometimes his style and color palette adapted to his new surroundings, but again, he used art to connect to his environment. These paintings, which are all in the collection of the Holland Museum, were a recent gift from Alton's granddaughter and are just a sampling of the numerous paintings he completed during a year-long stay with his family in the Netherlands. And you can see in these works that the palette is similar to what we noticed in that painting we were just looking at from 1915, and these are from 1910. So those earlier works, he tends to have a little more of a tonal palette, you know, grays and browns, and then later on, and some of this may be inspired by some of his trips to the American Southwest, that his colors eventually become much more vibrant and bright and intense. So here's a look at the exhibit that is currently on display at the Holland Museum. And as I said, the works that we're showing actually are not what most people expect to see from Alton's work. They expect to see the works that I was just showing you, his many paintings of farm life and the Lake Michigan shoreline and their oil paintings. But we decided that we wanted to look beyond those and look at the artist and the artistic process. So this exhibition features 2 watercolors, which you see on the screen, and 5 drawings, works of art that were private and more intimate for the artist. We are fortunate that they still exist so that we can see this other aspect of Alton's work. The 2 works that are on the screen are actually a double-sided painting. So he used both sides of the paper. Now that may be partly because of economy, you know, he's saving paper, but also most likely a lot of it was that if he was out someplace painting and something inspired, he needed the materials that were close at hand. So these are watercolors on paper, and watercolor is a medium that requires a different touch than oil painting. Watercolor is a very unforgiving medium in that if you make a mistake, you can't do anything about it. With oil paintings, you can scrape the paint off down to the canvas, even if you have to, and start relayering the paint and can go back and fix things. Watercolor, once that color is down, that's where it is. So it takes a lot of skill to be able to control watercolor in the way that an artist would like to be able to control it. So even though watercolor was not his main medium, Alton clearly is an expert hand at watercolor, as is seen in these 2 works. And I think he probably would have considered these really almost watercolor sketches, but they are very sophisticated, incredibly well organized in their composition. The effects that he was able to create in a foggy day are nothing short of amazing. And to really get a sense of that fog that's enveloping the space and all of the objects that are in the composition. And then the brightness, contrasting that with the brightness of the Lake Michigan dunes. Just, you know, two completely different works of art. I think it's amazing that they are versos of each other, but it's just, you know, incredible. So this shows that he was still also exploring his home, his adopted home. He had been traveling quite extensively up until this time and even beyond this. But here he was back in Michigan and exploring areas of Grand Rapids, the city, going again to the dunes, the lakeshore, and exploring his home and all of its facets. The setting of A Foggy Day is a view of the old fountain, which is now removed at what is now Veterans Memorial Park in downtown Grand Rapids. And the First Park Congregational Church is actually seen in the background. The verso, the other side, is this unfinished watercolor, Lake Michigan dunes. Although I mean, maybe he considered it unfinished. I think it's quite finished. So again, talking about his watercolor technique, it's very easy, it's very fluid. He has these broad washes of color. He uses the color of the paper, and we see this especially in the Lake Michigan dunes, because the color of the paper is what really creates the structure of the dunes. And then he's painting the color on top of that and around it. So he's using that paper as part of the composition. And we also see that on the left in The Foggy Day. There don't seem to be many of his watercolors that survived. So it is even more of a pleasure to see these paintings as evidence that Alton's technique was more wide-ranging than just oil painting. And he did work en plein air, which is outside, you know, painting in the scene as it was taking place, recording events and scenes as they happen. So on to his drawings. Drawing, of course, is as old as art itself, but it has always played a rather subordinate role in art history. While putting marks on a surface is emphasized as an important part of an artist's formal education, drawings were not really considered as independent works of art until around the 14th century. Drawings were private, evidence of the artist's working process, which of course can be messy and incomplete. And they were only the precursor to the grander finished work of art. During the Renaissance, however, drawings became evidence not just of the artist's process, but proof of the artist's genius. This shift in perception guides our viewing of Alton's figure sketches from the 1920s. Alton was a classically trained artist, studying not only drawing and painting in Grand Rapids, but also at the Académie Julienne and later the Académie Colarossi in Paris, where he was awarded a gold medal in figure drawing. Clearly, he excelled at drawing classically inspired figures, such as those featured here. And his bold, expressive lines demonstrate his mastery of the medium. So here's another example of one of his drawings. And surely, I'm sure he never meant for the public to see these drawings. They are torn from sketchbooks. Again, he used both sides of the paper, and he would feature multiple drawings on each page. He is clearly working out, and in this example, working out poses for the female form in a variety of sizes and shapes and gestures and forms. He's, you know, we are seeing his process here. And we can clearly see the influence of classical Greek and Roman, as well as the Italian Renaissance interest in human proportions and the idealized female body. In these graphite drawings, but it's clear from these drawings and the sketches that he is an accomplished artist who's been thoroughly trained, recognizes the importance of the complete artist training. And these, again, thinking of drawings as evidence of the artist's genius, we see his genius and his training that really shine through here in these works. It is likely that many of the drawings that we have on display were preparatory sketches, possibly for murals, and he did do some murals, but we don't have any exact connection from these drawings to a finished mural painting that Alton did. So I just put up this example of a painting that he did, just as so you can see that probably the connection between these drawings and some of these finished works. So on the right, we have this classically inspired allegory about the sources of wealth. And this is a copy of a mural that Alton created. Alton borrowed the scene from late 19th century muralist, educator, and artistic traditionalist Kenyon Cox. Alton modified the work by painting along the horizon his own version of a beach landscape, which you can kind of see in the background underneath the figure that's hovering in the air there. So there's a beach landscape back there, which is not in the Kenyon Cox painting. And he did this to reflect the city of Grand Haven, which is where this mural was installed at the Grand Haven State Bank. And the entire mural, it's actually multiple pieces, is entitled The Uses of Wealth. So throughout his career, Alton painted romanticized and idyllic scenes of the Michigan landscape and other locales. And while he is best known for his landscapes and seascapes, he's also an accomplished muralist, portrait painter, still life artist, and animal painter. He didn't subscribe to any one school of painting and followed his instincts and artistic dreams. He achieved much recognition and acclaim across the country for his work, but found most acceptance and support as an immigrant and as an artist from his home community of Grand Rapids, where he lived and worked until his death in 1938. So that is a little overview on Alton, Matthias Alton, and we do hope that you'll come down to the Holland Museum and see these works and celebrate his achievements and his story. So I just wanted to take a pause before we move on to talking about some of the other things that are happening at the museum to see if there was anybody who had any questions about Alton.
I'm looking at the chat and I don't see, actually my chat. You know, there was one comment, there was a little distortion on the sound at the beginning of your presentation. Peg,
Okay.
are you hearing that as well? Okay, it might be the person that was the only thing in the chat. So that if anybody does have a response to the first part of the presentation, be sure to unmute yourself and ask the question now.
And that's certainly fine. If no one has questions, that's great. But yes, if you find you have one, you could put it in the chat or ask it later on. We will have another opportunity at the end for questions. Moving, we wanted to, Ricky and I are going to sort of tag team here to talk about other things that are coming up at the museum, things to look forward to. And so I'm going to start with talking about our next exhibition that will be on display starting in August. The Holland Museum will present an exhibition celebrating the history and stories of LAUP, Latin Americans United for Progress, an organization with an over 50-year history in the city of Holland. The exhibition will explore the origins of LAUP as a service organization for Latinx immigrants, providing services such as fair housing and translation services and other community support. And then as it evolved to an educational and leadership organization that hosts events like their annual fiesta, their Queen competition, which encourages young Latinas to be their best selves. And you can see on the screen, I've listed some of their other programs, youth and adult programs, college advising, interpreter services, youth leadership conference. And their mission, LAUP empowers Latinos to participate in creating a better community for all through advocacy, celebration, and education. The exhibition will feature photographs and oral histories, as well as other artifacts, to tell the rich stories of an organization that has played such an important role in the vibrant cultural community that is Holland. In support of this exhibition, the Holland Museum is partnering with Explore Hope at Hope College to create a new cultural heritage course, which will provide engagement and experiential learning for Hope students. In this class, documenting Holland's historical diversity, the students will research Laup and related local history topics, collaborate with the Holland Museum staff to learn exhibition planning, and use the United for Progress exhibition as the foundation for an expanded digital exhibition, along with lesson plans and other interactive materials for local schools. The goal is to foster engagement between the community and its diverse cultural history, and to create space for important conversations surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, celebrating Holland's Latinx voices, contributions, and narratives. And this project is funded by a Mellon Foundation grant. Other programs still in development in connection with the exhibition will include talks featuring Yada Ramirez, the Laup's programs director, and the Reverend Ben Aguilera, interim executive director, who will speak about Laup's past, present, and their future. Sarah Jor van Oosterhout from Lighthouse Immigration Advocates, and Aaron van Oosterhout, who has written extensively on Mexican immigration to the Midwest. We will also be speaking. And a multi-day Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, program in October. So please stay tuned for more program information in the coming months. And something else I'm going to just talk about briefly before I turn things over to Ricky are the cultural lens programs that I think have been discussed in a previous program. But the cultural lens programs are a series of programs that the museum is doing as we have made a commitment to represent and honor the cultural diversity of Holland, not only through our board, staff, and exhibitions, but also through programs. Part of that strategic commitment is this series, The Cultural Lens, which started in 2019 during the THEM exhibition. With community partners and the support of a wonderful group of sponsors, and you see them listed at the bottom of your screen. We are working to amplify the voices and stories of all of our audiences. And so here are some of the programs that will be available virtually in the coming months. So listed at the top is our Diversity and Culture Book Club, which is for families, and that is an ongoing collaboration. And people can sign up to participate in the book club through our website. In June, we're going to have a program to celebrate Juneteenth, which is June 19th. And we will have a storyteller named Rosie Chapman, and she will be taking on the persona of Harriet Tubman and telling the story of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. June 24th, we will have a program on Holland Pride, featuring Jeffrey Sorensen from Out at the Lakeshore and Sarah Van Tongrenin. In July, a disability awareness program with Stacy Trowbridge from Disability Network Lakeshore. And August 12th, Jay Knight and Jenny Mills will be with us again. They have previously done a cultural lens program. And this time they will be talking about creating affirming spaces for members of the LGBTQ community. So we are really excited about this schedule of programs for the cultural lens, and we hope you will keep your eye out for more information on how to register for those programs in the coming months. So I'm going to turn things over to Ricky.
Thank you, Michelle. Wow, I learned so much about Alton. I knew she was the right person to present that part of the program. We just wanted to tell you about some things that are coming up in addition to what Michelle just touched upon. And we all know Tulip Time in its new form, at least its current iteration, starts on Saturday. And we are participating. We have extended our hours during tulip time, not quite as robust as we would do in a normal year, but we've added Sunday for this first weekend and Thursday of next week as 2 days in addition to our normal hours. And then we are going to be giving out activity kits to people, families who come into the museum during the time of tulip time. And they're really wonderful origami tulip making kits. So it's not just for kids, certainly adults can enjoy that as well. We're also participating in Marketplace, which is at the Civic Center. And we will be there with an exhibition of some of the items from our Dutch gallery that tie into tulip time because they're still lives of tulips, and some Dutch costumes as well as some Delft. So we'll have some information there, really hoping people will come to Marketplace, and if they have not been yet, come to the museum as part of their experience during tulip time. Next slide, please, Michelle. So we all are also opening the historic homes, and this is, they've been missing visitors for over a year now. We closed down, obviously, before tulip time would have occurred last year. We stayed closed during the summer months. And so we are opening them up for reservation tours, group tours only, really small groups, your own household or your own safe pod that you like to travel with, up to 10 people. And we will be doing this over the summer months as well. So we will be planning on having the houses open. But even if you don't come for a tour and you just want to look at the grounds, the Garden Club, the Holland Garden Club does an exceptional job of the Capon House. And this middle picture here is a picture of the newly restored fountain that was restored last summer by funds raised by the Garden Club. And it is just exceptional. So just take a walk around the house, even if you don't want to come in or can't come in for a tour, because it's really always a delight starting now as the tulips start emerging and other spring flowers. Next slide, please. So I always have to talk about membership because that's one of the driving revenue factors for the museum is our membership as well as donations, sponsors, and grants. And there are 3 simple ways to become members. We have 3 levels of membership. Basic is just for 1 individual and a guest. Family is 2 adults and children under 17. So that can include children and grandchildren. And that's for 2 adults, but also in all of our memberships, you are invited to bring guests at no additional charge. And our premium, which is for adults and children under 17, also gives you the admission to NARM reciprocal, North American reciprocal museums that participate in that program. And there are many, many over the course of North America where you, just because you're a Holland Museum member, it allows you to have admission to any of those museums that participate as well. So it's a really, if you like to travel at all, and even regionally travel, you'll have great opportunities to explore other museums. Chicago, for instance, has several NARM membership museums. And then you also get Michigan History Magazine as part of that level of membership. So I also wanted to talk about the impact of COVID-19. Obviously, the fact that we are doing this program through Zoom is one of the impacts of COVID-19. We're hoping that in time for our August program that we're doing with HASP, we may be able to do things in person. We still have to just play it by ear. We follow the CDC guidelines as well as state guidelines for everything that we're doing. But next slide, please. This has been a result of the last year, 15 months. So our fundraising events, and we have 2 that we've been doing. The annual trivia night was canceled in 2020 and it was canceled again for this spring. Museum on Tap, we just introduced the winter of 2019. We had to 2020, we had to cancel it for 2021. So a huge revenue stream has been lost. We hope temporarily, but because of these events that really impact us on an annual basis. So we have another wonderful way to support us, and this is another fundraiser that we're introducing, and we're starting what we hope is to be a series called Preserving Our Stories. I know this slide is a little hard to see, but essentially what we're doing is we're telling the story of a local family-owned business, about the family and about the business, and we are starting it off with the Holland Peanut Store. So the full title of this first event is Preserving Our Stories, A Sweet History of Holland Peanut Store. And it's Thursday, May 20th. It will be a virtual program, but with your ticket, you get an opportunity to get a goodie bag full of peanut store treats, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed. You also will get a Zoom link to the program, which will be both live and virtual. And the biggest really perk of the evening is this wonderful history video of the family talking about their family and their business. It's now run by 4th and 5th generation family members, and they have withstood adversity and challenges that many of you may be aware of, others that you may not be familiar with. And they are still a wonderful, iconic store that people come from all over to shop in and to enjoy their goodies. We actually did a videotape close to 3 hours capturing the history of them talking. And we've narrowed it down to about 20 minutes of video that you'll see the night of. But we do have 3 hours of wonderful information that will become part of our collection and will be available to the public down the road. So you will be able to have even more insights than you'll get that night. All of the proceeds that we raise for ticket sales are actually going to the education initiatives at the museum. So that includes exhibitions and tours and programs. And then the night of the event, we're actually going to ask for another gift from participants. And that money will go towards outreach for our educational programs. So that would be getting bus tours of school groups to come to the museum, paying for the bus, the transportation, admission to the museum or the houses. It also may include us taking the opportunity to go to a school that would like a museum professional to come and do a presentation or share Spark Lab activities or share history activities. And it also will cover some memberships for families. And those school groups and those families that we would help with the funds that we raise the evening of are those in under-resourced areas. So it's not going to be somebody that can otherwise afford to come to the museum. It'll be for those families and schools that can't. And so we're hoping we'll have a good outturn for this. We have at this point sold more than a third of the tickets available for that evening. So if you're interested, you can see it on the screen how to find out more information. You can go to our website, or you can call Katie Baker, who is taking reservations as we speak. And it'll be a fun night, but it'll be a worthwhile cause for both the museum as well as education overall. Next slide, please. So these are our normal museum hours. Like I said, we're extending them a little bit for tulip time. We will be going back to these hours and days, Monday, Friday, and Saturday, full days from 10 to 5. We hope at some point to be able to expand to additional days, but that's what it will be for the time being. We continue to be open the free second Mondays of every month, which is a sponsorship from the Meyer Foundation, which we're so grateful for, because those evenings we invite the public to come in for free from 4 to 7 p.m. Love to do that every Monday night, but we need more funding for that. Right now, Spark Lab is closed because it's such a hands-on kind of family activity, but we're looking for guidance from the Smithsonian, and the CDC seems to be changing some of the protocols. So we're hoping we'll be able to at least open that again by appointment for smaller groups, but maybe even more robustly later this summer. And the clock, which you see pictured here, was refurbished a little over a year ago, and it runs now the first Saturday of every month at 12 noon. And there's a delightful videotape on our website of the clock running with beautiful music. If you're so inspired to take a look at that, I welcome you to. But to see it in person is a real treat. So ways to support the museum. Obviously, we're always looking for volunteers. I know some of our volunteers are on this Zoom call. We're always looking for docents or people to do tours of the houses. All of these areas that see highlighted under volunteer, we look for people to become members because that's a way to financially support us, but also it tells us that you like what we're doing and you think we're going in the right direction. Attend programs. All of those programs that were listed by Michelle in our Cultural Lens programs are actually virtual right now, and they are free programs. Occasionally we will have to hire somebody for a program, and then we will pass on those costs, but we really try to be accessible to everyone in the community as much as possible. So we do keep the cost down, or to ask for donations only. And visit. The museum is open. We've been open since July. Bring a friend, shop in the gift shop, become a donor, and then certainly attend that virtual fundraiser would be a great way to show your support of the museum. So these are some upcoming events that we wanted to bring to your attention. Actually, I'm going to ask Michelle to tell you a little bit about tomorrow night's program, which you have to register for today. That's Inside the Artist's Mind. And then an upcoming program, the Artistic Practice, which is on May 13th. Michelle, you want to jump in here?
Sure. So both of these programs will expand upon and support the Alton exhibition that I just spoke about. So tomorrow night, Royce Deans, who is a Michigan artist, he's also an educator, has been teaching drawing for over 30 years. He will be speaking about Alton's drawings particularly, but he will be looking at them from the perspective of a fellow artist. So he will be able to speak even more in depth about what is going through an artist's mind when they are drawing and the purposes behind those drawings, and really give us that insider's look. Short of being able to ask Alton himself, I think this will give you an interesting perspective on those works. And that program is free, and you can still register for it today. You have to go to our website and through the calendar, and there will be a link to Eventbrite to register, and then you will get the Zoom link to join us tomorrow night. So that starts at 7 o'clock. And then May 13th, I mentioned Joel in my presentation. Joel is the curator of exhibitions from Grand Valley State University Art Gallery, where we borrowed all of the works that are on display at the museum. So he is an expert on Matthias Alton. So he will be putting the drawings that are on display and the watercolors in more of a context of his whole career. But from the curator's point of view, someone who is a real expert in Alton. So again, that is a free program. It's virtual. You again would sign up through our website, and then you would receive the Zoom link for the program a day or so before the program so that you can join us. So we hope we will see you then.
And then don't forget about our fabulous fundraiser. So now we'd love to open it up to questions, either about Alton or any of our upcoming events or exhibitions. We'd love to hear from you.
We just have one person in the chat that commented they really enjoyed the Alton presentation. That was a good job on that. So.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything you want to talk about regarding the presentation, or maybe some other questions about the museum.
Michelle?
Yes.
What is the time for the May 13 program?
7 o'clock as well. Yep.
Not maybe, but thank you very much for confirming that.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your excellent presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to do it.
Some years ago, when it was first available to us, HASP went over to the Matthias Alton exhibit at Grand Valley, and it was a fabulous introduction to see all of the different things in the different rooms and hear the presentation that was made at that time. So as a non-art follower, that has been very interesting to me. So thanks for adding.
Grand Valley is the keeper of the largest collection of Alton's work. So Alton's works have been spread throughout West Michigan in a variety of museums. The Holland Museum is one, Grand Rapids Art Museum, the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. Many, many museums have been the recipients of Alton's works, which is fabulous. But Grand Valley State is the repository of the majority of much of his remaining collection. And if you really want to take a deep dive into Alton, I would check out their Alton portal. That's what they call it. You can Google it and actually just Google, put in Alton portal, Portal, at Grand Valley State University, and it will take you to a website that has his catalog raisonné, which is basically a fancy word for showing images and information about all of the pieces that he completed throughout his lifetime. So it's many pages, an incredible number of images. It has a timeline. It has articles written about him. It has information about his family, and it's a wealth of information. So if you would like to learn more about Alton, that is the place to go.
I'm going to go ahead and I just cut and pasted. If everybody looks at their chat, the link to that is in the chat. And you could cut and paste that into your browser or just write that down and you should be able to access it.
I would also like to add that the Gordon Brown Gallery, which is on the Grand Rapids campus, is where they display Alton's work, or a large amount of Alton's work. And I know as a museum membership perk, we had a tour there when we had our last exhibit for Alton after we received the donation from Anita Gillio, who is Alton's granddaughter, that gave us the paintings from the Netherlands. But that those galleries are open to the public, but if you wanted to get more of a private tour, again, I suspect this will be in a more post-COVID world than we are now, but you would be able to have access to it. And it's exceptional. Michelle talked about how his influence of his paintings were impacted by his travels. And you can see that from his works from Spain, or his works from Southern California, or the other parts of the Southwest. And it's just a trove of really wonderful art to enjoy, whether you're an art knowledge person or not. It really is a delight.
I have something in the chat from Peg. If applicable, how does the Alton work compare with the Hudson School of Painting?
That's an interesting question. Well, timeline, just strictly looking at timeline, Alton is definitely past the Hudson River School time period, which is really mid 19th century. So 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, they had pretty much kind of gone out of favor and style around the 1870s. But one thing that I would certainly think that he carried over, I wouldn't necessarily call it an influence, but because he may not have been really very cognizant of the Hudson River School artists, but I would say one of the things that he would certainly have an affinity and a connection with them is certainly an interest in landscape and an interest in and a love and respect for the land. And I think that comes through very clearly in his paintings. And that certainly was a major part of the Hudson River School artists. Their reverence went into the point of reverence in terms of really thinking about God within the landscape. I wouldn't necessarily connect Alton to that, but certainly a respect and an interest in preserving the landscape in paint. I would certainly think that there's an affinity there between the school, the Hudson River School, and Alton. So that's a very interesting question.
Thank you. Is there anything else? We still have quite a few people on the call, so if you have anything else that you want to say, otherwise we can certainly wrap a little bit early this afternoon. Well, I would love to thank Ricky and Michelle for a wonderful presentation and lots of information. I think that obviously the Holland Museum is such an important part of our community, and Hope and Hasp appreciate the relationship that we share. So thank both of you, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person soon.
That would be delightful. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for having us this afternoon. It was great fun.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.